Hi, this is Henry Covert with She Never Slept. I'm returning after a long absence with VideoCast review. I'll be resurrecting my column Retrodrome, looking at kind of old, forgotten obscurities, films, music, books, but today I'd like to do a review of the new X-Men film, X-Men Days of Future Past. And I thought it was a good fit because it's the most science fiction-y of the films so far that they've done in the X-Men series, and it kind of uses a lot of sci-fi conventions and kind of time paradoxes and trying to resolve continuity snafus between the 7 movies they've already shot. And there's already been a lot of mistakes and a lot of complaints from fans and a lot of reboots here and there. So this is kind of a sly way of tackling those problems while telling a story at the same time, you know, that hopefully would be engaging and interesting on its own. I'm not completely convinced that they succeeded in all those fronts, but I think that they tried. But I'll talk about what worked and what didn't work for me. I'm a huge fan of the X-Men trilogy, the original one, as you can tell. I will admit, as everyone knows, that the third one was somewhat lackluster compared to the first two. I still have a soft spot for it for a variety of reasons, like Kelsey Grammer, Ellen Page, and a few scenes here and there. But admittedly, the first two by Bryan Singer were really masterpieces. They really kick-started the superhero film boom. If it wasn't for X-Men's success, you know, there had been Blade, but he was kind of marginal. But if there hadn't been for the X-Men's success, I think that would have been it for years after the fiasco of Batman and Robin kind of killed off people taking these movies seriously. And I was in love with the movie right away, and I had stopped reading the comic books all through the 90s, but I did follow the plot lines through the cartoons and through browsing at the drugstore once in a while. So I kind of knew who the characters were and what was going on, but it was a new generation and a new kind of set of villains and a lot of complicated alternate timelines and continuities, and it was really hard for a new reader to have any idea what was going on with the X-Men. You had to be inculcated into this universe since you were like 5 years old, like I had been, to even begin to understand, like, who's Cable, who's Bishop, why did they travel through time, who's the long-lost stepfather, you know, and all this kind of stuff. It was very off-putting to a lot of people. And so Marvel, you know, they were working on the film, and the film was a way to streamline all this and make a new story that took Bryan Singer's favorite characters from the cartoon, and he decided to make a film and treat it as though he had treated his other films, Apt Pupil and Usual Suspects, which is kind of like a downbeat indie thriller almost, but with a lot of science fiction and action. I don't know how else to describe the first X-Men movie. It has a certain quality to it that doesn't feel like a huge overblown blockbuster film. The second movie is an overblown blockbuster film, but not overblown in a bad sense of the word. It delivers it visually in every way, but the story is strong and gripping. The acting's great. A lot of people prefer it by far to the first one. I have a special place for the first one and always will, but the second one is a close second, and I really love it. Things got complicated with the third movie, and Bryan Singer left to do Superman Returns, and you know, ever since then his career's been kind of up and down after he did that movie, and I don't know why, all the whys and wherefores, but for some reason he stayed in touch with Fox, and they had Matthew Vaughn, who was going to direct 3. Matthew Vaughn directed X-Men First Class. They decided to do a prequel. And they'd done a Wolverine origin prequel, and a film that should have been incredible. It was very faithful to the comic books, but it just as a film, it did not gel. It was clunky. It was corny. It had a lot of things in it that just weren't Wolverine and didn't have the right mood or the right vibe to it. Now, a lot of people will crucify me for saying this, but I feel the same way about First Class. I've never cared for the film whatsoever. I think the casting was poor all the way down the line, even to the incredibly hyped Jennifer Lawrence, who's supposed to be God's gift to actresses now, but I'm just not seeing it. Maybe there's something there that is beyond me. But, you know, I think that First Class was a lightweight film. Like, let's do a 60s frothy spy film, caper film, and put them in their yellow and black underwear like they were in the comics. And to a lot of comics readers, then they go, oh cool, it's great because now they're really in their black and yellow outfits. So fuck all those Bryan Singer movies, because this is like how they're supposed to look. So that makes it a good movie. And it's like, no, it doesn't make it a good movie. It satisfies urges of fanboys, but that doesn't necessarily make it good cinema. And I felt as though it was just a by-the-numbers kind of film. Plus, it contradicted the continuity of the other stories. Very small point. Magneto's helmet, the whole convoluted story of how he gets his helmet. It was all outlined in the very first X-Men movie very elegantly. And then they made this incredible backstory for it in First Class that made absolutely no sense, that involved Kevin Bacon wearing it and talking about how silly it looked. And I thought, if you have to apologize for it that much, then why are you using it? You know, are you ashamed of Jack Kirby's design? I mean, I'm not, you know, and a lot of the fans aren't, but oh well, that's what you get. And Matthew Vaughn was going to direct the next film, unfortunately, and he had to drop out, and Bryan Singer somehow raised his head and said, let me go ahead and direct an X-Men movie again. And they were like, well, what the hell? So he decided that he wanted to do a storyline called Days of Future Past. And I've read online people criticizing the title. A lot of people think it's cool, I do, but a lot of people are like, what does that mean? Why is it so ponderous and stupid? Who came up with it? Well, a rock band called the Moody Blues came up with it in the late 60s, an album called Days of Future Past with Knights of White Satin as the hit single on it. That's who came up with it. Chris Claremont borrowed it as, you know, the title for his two-parter that he and John Byrne did around the early 80s, issues 141 and 142, I remember, of Uncanny. And basically Kitty Pryde sends her younger self back into the present day from the future in order to stop Mystique, a shape-shifting mutant terrorist, from killing the Senator, and thereby passing the Mutant Registration Act. Well, they had already mined the Senator and Mutant Registration Act story in the first X-Men movie, so they had to come up with another hook. Mystique, in this case, is going to kill Bolivar Trask. Now, he's a very old and venerable Stan Lee Jack Kirby character from the very first X-Men stories in the 60s, and he created the lethal robots called the Sentinels. And the Sentinels, of course, are the big bads of this movie. And but, you know, he basically he believes that humanity is on the verge of extermination, and that the Sentinels are the way to target mutants and destroy them. Now, this is all very ironic in this film because Bolivar Trask is played by Peter Dinklage, who is a dwarf in real life. And I'm not sure if there's supposed to be an irony to the thing or not, because they didn't give Dinklage enough to work with. I mean, he was great at what he did. You know, everything he said was fantastic. But he didn't quite get enough meat, you know, to be such a pivotal character. But then again, that was true of Bolivar Trask in the comic books anyway. So, what the heck. Anyway, that's Mystique's mission, is to kill him and stop his experimentation on mutants, stop the Sentinels. And so somebody's got to go back in time and stop her, or this will cause a dystopian world where the Sentinels have adapted using Mystique's shape-shifting technology, and they can just basically counter any foe and annihilate anyone, and they annihilate human and mutant alike and enslave humans and mutants. And it's this future world that the movie begins with. And these sequences are my favorite ones. They took a lot of ideas from a lot of the future X-Men stories, the alternate reality stories that they're real fond of. And it's a good comment on those kind of stories. They changed it around a little bit. In this one, Kitty Pryde sends Wolverine's consciousness back because Kitty Pryde wouldn't have been born 50 years earlier in this timeline. So Wolverine was, and his mind also could heal, which was a nice idea because that had been introduced in the comic books but never in the movies, that his mind could heal. And that's why X-Men Origins ended so crappily, because his mind, he gained amnesia because his mind healed, not because of an adamantium bullet, which was a ludicrous MacGuffin. So the deal with Kitty Pryde is, in this reality, she can not only phase through objects, but she can phase through time and space. And she can do it for short periods of time. And they've enlisted these new X-Men who are the younger generation to be their guardians. And there's like Bishop, played by Omar Sy, and Blink, played by Bing Bing Fan, and I don't know the other actors' names who played Sunspot and Warpath off the top of my head, but they were all good, especially Bing Bing Fan, with really almost no dialogue. She was very expressive, almost like a dancer, because she phases through these giant purple apertures in space. And meanwhile, Bishop, he charges this huge gun with other people's energy and unleashes the power and kinetic energy. And both of those looked and had powers exactly like the comic books. I was really, really happy with that. And so anyway, they're kind of the lookout, and Kitty keeps them from being killed as they move across Russia and Moscow. Finally, they find refuge in China. And in China, Professor X says, and everyone here knows who Professor X is, I'm assuming. Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier, says, okay, let's do it. Let's send Wolverine back. And they decide to go ahead and try it. And of course, Bobby, Iceman, is very worried because in this alternate reality, there's a hint of this in Last Stand. Bobby and Kitty have become a couple, and you don't know what has happened to Rogue, whether she's been killed by the Sentinels or not. We'll find out on the deluxe expanded Blu-ray, supposedly. But anyway, it was a shame not seeing Anna Paquin as a result. But anyway, they go ahead and decide to do this thing, and Wolverine is going to go back to 1973 and find, in his old body, which hasn't aged at all, and in 50 years, and he's going to find Charles Xavier and Eric Lensher, Magneto, and played also by Sir Ian McKellen. And this is where the movie hits, a kind of it kind of meanders. It kind of, there's a lot of things that just aren't tight about it, that I have problems with structurally. Like, for instance, one of the first things they do, which is very cool, after they, after Logan talks Charles into doing it, because Charles has become a broken, drug-addicted, wastrel of a man after the events of First Class. So he's played by James McAvoy, who portrayed the younger Charles in First Class. I was not a fan of that casting at all. I don't think he's Xavier, but he did do some very fine acting in this movie, I will say that. And he tears up really well at the drop of a hat. And so anyway, Wolverine is basically like, you're the professor, what's happened to you? What's become of you? And he's like, I've got to teach you now. I've got to show you the way. And so Hank McCoy, a.k.a. the Beast, is still around. And he's the only one of the original X-Men still with Xavier. And so the three of them decide they're going to break out Magneto and get his help. Well, I'll say this much. That was the biggest mistake they made plot-wise. I mean, I know why they did it plot-wise, the characters, but they made a mistake. They find out later that Magneto can't be controlled or coerced, and it backfired on them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In order to do this, they call upon this kid named Peter, or Pietro, as we know him, Quicksilver. And Quicksilver in the comic books is Magneto's son. And they kind of make it clear in the film that he's his son in the film, but they don't explore the subplot, which I know made some people upset. But I was okay with them being sly with it. It didn't drive me crazy or anything. I wish they'd gone more for it, but he was such an endearing character, and they did his breakout of Magneto so skillfully. It was like a music video that it was set to Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce, and you really saw how the world looks to Quicksilver, how everything is so slow to him in this kind of haze where he can just kind of just leisurely do whatever, you know, and he can make bullets, like just move them over a little bit so that when the effect's over it hits the wall instead of the person. And he looked really cool in his goggles, and he had silver hair and a silver spray painted leather jacket and a Pink Floyd t-shirt. And he definitely should come back in future installments. I think he's a cool character. And but what was to me stupid was then they say goodbye to him, and that's that. And I thought, well, they need as many allies as they can get. It's little things like that, that logic things in the script that I think weren't thought out. But anyway, after a long convoluted series of things with Mystique going back and forth, you know, she infiltrates this Chinese ambassador. She takes his identity, and just all these little things. She's trying to get to Richard Nixon, and she keeps trying to get closer to Trask. And I got kind of sick of Mystique after a while. I didn't feel any sympathy for the character. I didn't buy her whole, oh, I'm so tormented. And maybe it was part of it was, you know, Jennifer Lawrence. I don't know, part of it was Bryan Singer. I felt as though it was not true to the Mystique in the other films or in the comic books. And therefore you kind of have this character that's catering to the fact you have this really powerful actress, powerful as far as being able, I'm sure, to, you know, star billing. I don't know, I think they hinge so much on her. But to be fair, the original story was Mystique's going to kill somebody if we don't stop her. So, you know, it does hinge on her, you know, ultimately plot-wise. But then Magneto goes crazy and betrays the rest and decides he's going to do, you know, his thing and just be all showy. And I particularly disliked the actor playing the young Magneto during this sequence. I didn't find his story convincing. I mean, I knew what he was trying to say. The writing wasn't that bad, but I felt as though, well, I'm just spoiled by Ian McKellen. And I wasn't keen on Fassbender, the actor. I love the director Fassbender, different person. The actor Michael Fassbender, I wasn't keen on him in First Class. I didn't understand why he didn't have silver hair like Magneto. That kind of confused me. That was a cosmetic thing, you know, but I overlooked it. I didn't understand why Charles wasn't bald either. But I kind of felt like he did okay, but he didn't really bring it. Now, there's one scene in the movie where he really kind of starts to bring it when Charles is going off on him, and he goes off on Charles' back, and they're on a plane, and the plane starts to shake itself apart because Magneto's losing control of his magnetism powers. And he discusses how Charles abandoned all the mutants, and he names all the mutants that were killed, and how he, you know, turned on their race. Loved that scene. I thought that was good. And it was really funny because then Wolverine says to Magneto, "So you were always an asshole, huh?" And they had a good dynamic, those two. But anyway, so it ends basically not in a giant explosion and outer space or whatever, but they're toggling back and forth between the future reality and the White House, which is being under siege by Magneto, and it's Magneto and Mystique facing off, and depending on what each of them do is going to determine the future. And Wolverine can't help because Wolverine's been defeated by Magneto, and because Wolverine, he's a lot more vulnerable now. He doesn't have his adamantium skeleton. That would make him vulnerable to Magneto anyway. But it's worse this time. What he does to Logan is pretty grotesque, actually. But so they're in the stadium and they're having this showdown, and finally, you're back at where you began with the dystopian world of 2023, and these adapting Sentinels. Major spoilers ahead, as if I haven't given you enough spoilers. Major spoilers ahead. The Sentinels are annihilating the X-Men, and it's just an incredibly violent. I mean, I was like kind of shocked, like how hardcore they were going on these characters, and it was shocking. I mean, I felt sad when the characters died, even though I knew, they're going to reverse time, blah, blah, blah. I still felt sad, seeing the characters die. And Magneto especially has a touching scene with Charles Xavier where they hold hands. That's really beautiful. And, but then, things change. And you see the effects of what has changed, because the whole idea that Patrick Stewart's Xavier said was, is time truly set? And later, James McAvoy's Xavier says the same thing. And the truth is, it's not. And, so what has happened is some other reality has been spawned of this. Another alternate reality. And Wolverine wakes up, and this time he's back in 2023, but things are like they were roughly in the X2, X3 things. I mean, you've got the same characters, you've got the same actors, the school is open and vibrant. These scenes were beautiful and very touching to me because I love the ensemble, I love those characters. But anyway, the ending itself I thought was another kind of contrived twist, and I didn't really care for it that much. It's one of those, let's get everyone talking kind of twists, and that's fine and everything, but I was hoping the movie would end on a more zen note, shall we say, with Charles and Logan in a moment of understanding with each other, which was a beautiful scene. And so these are my feelings about the film. That's kind of my rundown of what I think of the series, and I've never seen the movie The Wolverine, so I can't comment on it, but I just wanted to share that, put that out there, some things that I liked and didn't like, the basic ideas of what it was about, and what my theories are as far as it goes. And to me, it's like fiction, it's like metafiction. It's like, did it happen or did it not happen? Well, it all happened, and yet none of it happened. It's metafiction. It's a metatextual thing. You're, from the minute the story opens, you're in an alternate future. So it's hard to say, like, what really happened, and that's a comment on, I think, whether they meant it to be or not, on the convoluted nature of the X-Men universe and their alternate realities and time travels and things like that. And in that sense, it's kind of satisfying. It's kind of a cool thing because that was a big part of the 90s X-Men series. So that's pretty much my review. I hope not too many people will throw virtual tomatoes at the screen when they read it. But it's good being back, and I'll be reviewing some more stuff soon. And hang in there.